a team that shared the puck better than any team I've been on broke all these individual records. Like, the sport just teaches us those lessons, and sometimes it's so obvious. It's like, of course, that's how you create the most success.
Welcome to Actualize, a podcast focused on the intersection of performance, ambition, and mental health. I'm Rob Pentwala, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kim Foster-Yardley.
Rather than fixate on the wins and successes, our mission is to uncover the whole picture of the human being behind the performance. Join us as we interview top performers across business, sport, and the arts.
Actualize is presented by First Session. Have you ever considered trying therapy or simply just want to level up in your personal or professional life? I started First Session back in 2019 to help Canadians find the right mental health professional for them. Since then, we've connected thousands of Canadians with the right therapist, and I'm really passionate about helping each individual find the right fit in the therapist for them. We spend hours and hours interviewing therapists across Canada, and each one of them has a professional video for you to take a look at while you decide who might be the right fit for you. Check us out at firstsession.com.
Actualize is also presented by the Mental Game Clinic. The Mental Game Clinic was founded by myself, Kim Foster-Yardley. I combined my 20 years of experience as a clinical psychologist with my passion for sports psychology. And I built a team of therapists who specialize in working with high performers, Olympians, and founders. Find us at thementalgame.me.
Today's guest is Brianne Jenner. Brianne's a 3-time Olympian with the Canadian women's hockey team. She's won 2 Olympic golds and 1 silver, and was named the Beijing 2022 Olympic Tournament MVP, tying the record for most goals scored at an Olympic tournament. It was clear in this conversation that Brianne is a true leader and competitor. Her wisdom shines through, and it was also clear that Brianne truly cares about her teammates, both on and off the ice. Just a warning, we experienced a few internet challenges during this conversation, so there may be a few cuts, but the content was too good not to keep. We hope you'll enjoy Brianne Jenner.
So, Brianne, I wanted to know, which of those mental skills do you think are the most important that you've identified now in this later stage of your career?
Well, I think it's really personal. I know for me, I have a busy brain, and I'm really analytical. And so to perform at my best, what I've just kind of discovered is when I make the best plays, or I'm kind of in that flow state that athletes are always trying to chase, or any top performer, it doesn't have to be an athlete, my brain is off in a way, right? I'm part of my brain is turned on, that kind of subconscious, that autopilot that I've built through years and years of training. So for me, getting to that place, I have to sort of consciously use some tools to make sure that I'm quieting my brain down when it comes to performance time, and kind of letting it rest and not analyze. So, I've worked with mental performance coaches on different sort of distraction tools in the middle of the game, different, breathing processes, different ways I can kind of reset my focus. Because that's been a big piece for me, is just sort of quieting that brain. And then, when the game is over, the practice is over, then it's the time to kind of turn it back on and use that analytical side in a positive way.
That's
so
amazing.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like, is it a lot of the stuff just like mid game that you're like kind of going inward? Is that like, what does that actually look like for you?
For me, like the way that it would present often is just in the middle of the game. Like, hockey is unique because you sit down at, you go out there for 30, 45 seconds, and then you sit down and you think about that mistake, and it's that ability for me that I've tried to train to kind of let go of that mistake, not 2 or 3 shifts later, or not a day after processing the game, but immediately. It's kind of like that scene from Ted Lasso, if you guys have watched that show, where they talk about the goldfish and the 10-second memory, and goldfish are the happiest animals, right? Because of that. So that's sort of a skill that I've tried to kind of become better and better at, is recognizing, okay, I'm focusing on something that happened in the last shift or the last period, and that's not helping me for what's to come next. And I think obviously that's sort of a microcosm of an issue that we all deal with, maybe in different ways in our lives, but it's something that, in the moment in performances that I've had to work on is making sure that I can process those things in seconds rather than minutes or hours.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think if from my experience, like I hear when you hear interviews of professional athletes, so many of them are like visibly so hard on themselves. And they like even will say like, I'm the hardest person on myself, like harder than the coach, harder than my parents. Was that also, can you identify with that? And has part of this sort of training been to kind of evolve like out of that, or how do you hold that in balance?
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think it's something I can definitely relate to. I think for me, what I've tried to do is manage when I allow myself to do that. In the middle of a performance is not the time to be hard on yourself. It's the time to kind of honestly say to yourself that you're superhuman, like inflate your own ego. I remember reading this really interesting book written by a golfer. I think it's called The Championship Mindset, or How Champions Think. We read it as a team. And one of the quotes was a golfer was asked, about a 3-putt in a tournament. And he said, I've never 3-putt in my life, which is obviously not the truth. But it sort of gets at that idea that, while you're performing, when you're in that space, you need to 100% believe in yourself and just fill your brain with positive thoughts. And of course, I think it's really, really useful as an athlete to be hard on yourself and to constantly be looking for ways to improve. And it's sort of managing when you do that. And for me, it's, a training day or after a practice or watching video after a game. But certainly I've discovered it's not useful to do in the middle of a game.
That's great insight. Yeah. Kim, do you have any more questions about this training? Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, like, it must have been quite challenging to develop these skills. I often hear people saying it's just having to overcome these automatic habits. Like, what helps you to switch it off? And was it hard for you, or like what was the process like of learning the skill?
Well, I'm still in the process for sure. Like, I haven't nailed it. I've gotten better, but there's still times where I'll catch myself going down that thought process. We call it the hamster wheel on our team, right? The hamster starts going and it's hard to get it off the wheel. But I think part of it has just been, the introduction of the tools that I talked about and kind of just checking in. I've done journaling. I've had, conversations with a mental performance coach and just kind of coming back to it, not grading myself, but sort of checking in. How was I in that last event, that last tournament? Did I make use of, the plan that I had in place? But I wouldn't say that I'm a master at it. I think I'm still working at it, and it's still a focus, and it's an ongoing process. I think it'd be really hard to, every single time you have a negative train of thought, catch it right away. Right? We're human, and naturally your brain is wired to alert you to those things.
I love how you're saying that there's two sides, right? So there's the self-doubt and the questioning and the reviewing, which can be good at times and not at others. But then speaking about the confidence as well, what helps? What are your sources of confidence? What gives you that superhuman sense of yourself?
I think finding regular confidence is probably the most universal challenge for elite athletes. I can't think of a teammate who hasn't at one point or another, grappled with that, keeping confidence consistently. I think for me, the times I'm feeling most confident, I usually look back at past experiences and say, either you've been through this before, or you have the ability to do this, and sort of just kind of remind myself of the times that I've worked through those challenges. And I think that's, one of the big bonuses of, going through adversity early in your career, going through setbacks. I always say to young athletes, it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to have some setbacks. They'll may look different than other people's, but for me, those are a big source of confidence and of strength, having gone through that and learned from that. So for me, I always, when I'm feeling confident, I trust in what I've done in the past, and I also trust in the preparation I put in. I think if you don't put in that preparation, that's sort of the first way that eats away at your confidence, the first thing to peel your confidence back, if you know that you've maybe taken shortcuts in your process.
Hmm. I mean, I have two thoughts to that. The one is how confidence really does come from preparation and from practice, from having experiences and building on them. But the other piece of what you said that I thought was so important was that you also build confidence, that it's not like an absolute, that confidence is an absolute, and that there can be times where you struggle a bit more with confidence and other times where it's actually improved. It's not like a zero-sum game.
For sure. I think there's some times where you're feeling great. You're not even thinking about it. And then there's some times where that self-doubt creeps in and you have to kind of go back to your mental training on it and start to draw upon those things that I was just talking about, those past experiences, what you've been through, your preparation. But yeah, there's times, I think it's always kind of flowing. There's times where you're not even thinking about that. You're just feeling it.
And I think what you also said about changing your relationship with adversity, because I think often we're afraid of failure. And I think that's quite natural, right? Like to be afraid of messing up, doing the wrong thing. But yet there's so much we can learn and grow through that experience.
For sure. I think those are, when you think of what we fear, going into a competition or just going into any situation, it's, fear of failure, fear of being judged by others. And it's sort of when you acknowledge that, okay, those fears are there. They're going to be a part of any process that I go through, especially if I care about the outcome. Right. And just kind of acknowledging that, I know that's something that I've started to do a lot more, is just understand, okay, I have these nerves. I have this fear of not winning this game, of maybe not playing up to my potential, not representing my family as well as I want to, or my team as well as I want to. And it's, instead of looking at those as negative emotions, you take it as a sign that, okay, you're doing something that you really care about and you're really bought in on this. And so this is just good adrenaline.
I love that. Because like so much of our work is around helping clients to change in their relationship with stress and to see how much they care. And the answer is not to care less, right? It's actually to feel good about the fact that you care about something. Mm-hmm. We want to care about what we do. That's why we love it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Brianne, you mentioned that setbacks are inevitable. What have been some of your most challenging setbacks, and how did you face them, and what did you learn?
Well, like a lot of athletes, some of the major ones have been injuries. I think one of the toughest injuries I had was following my first Olympics in 2014. I went into that off season and started to have, I guess you would describe as an overuse injury. I wish it had just been, a broken bone or something that was easy to kind of diagnose. Because I always find that the toughest thing with injuries is when you don't know, when you don't have a plan, right? When there's a lot of unknowns. I think as athletes, we function so well when there's, okay, here's your physio plan. It's going to take you 3 months. And then this is, the possible outcome. For me, this one was challenging because it took me a couple seasons of kind of just playing through pain and seeing a lot of different practitioners and kind of finally being able to figure out what what it was and what my body needed. And, when I was going through it, um, it I was miserable at times. And it's so funny because like no one can tell you when you're in the middle of those moments and in those downs that like it's going to be a good thing. It's so hard to see that when you're in the valley, right? But coming out of that, I learned so much about my body, the prehab exercises I needed, what I needed to do in training to manage things. And I learned so much that at my healthiest now, in my 30s, healthier than I was in my 20s, feeling better on the ice than in my 20s. And I think, knock on wood, that injury might be a big reason that I can continue to play for years and years and have that longevity. And so it was coming back to that kind of notion of setbacks being some of the greatest things that happened to us. It for sure was. And if you had asked me that while I was in the middle of it, I would have, yelled at you probably, or rolled my eyes or something like that. So that was a big one for me. I mean, I also, a lot of the stereotypical athlete setbacks, I was cut from the first Olympics I tried out for, devastated. Mm-hmm. Knew exactly from that process what I needed to do to make the next one. I was part of a Team Canada that had the longest gold medal drought, which is still, tough to kind of swallow. But from that, we had a major cultural change. We revamped our program from inside our locker room, our coaches, everyone involved in our staff. And we have a culture now that every one of us is extremely proud of, coming out of what was a really dark time for our program. So those are just a few. There's lots of small ones along the way, but those are just a few, and honestly, wouldn't change any of them.
I'm curious about what you just said about revamping the culture. I mean, when I look at, as a pretty much a single sport Canadian myself, just who cares about hockey, I just think of the Canadian women's team as just like, there's so much expectation that you're gonna win. Like it's like, it's like, okay, you have to win. Like our women's team has to win. Like, do you feel that at all? And maybe people like me are making that worse pressure.
Yeah, we feel that. But that's what we want. I mean, when you are a little girl and you're dreaming about playing for Team Canada, you're dreaming about playing for gold. And that's the pressure that we want on ourselves. So I think it's something that we embrace. We have, we don't have any different expectations than Canadians. We have, we expect to win every competition that we go into. That's our goal. And obviously, the pressure's enormous when you're playing at Olympic Games, but boy, that's exciting. That's the dream, right?
Yeah. And I'm curious also about the cultural shift. I mean, before when you were speaking about, you mentioned like the hamster wheel saying, and you say like, we call it the hamster wheel on the team. Like, I've never played on a Olympic team before. I'm curious about like the culture of the team. Like how do you support one another? Like, are you talking about the mental game, the physical game, like all together? I know you're one of the leaders on the team now. Like, how do you think about the culture?
Well, I think there's a lot of kind of cornerstones to our culture that we set up in the last couple of years that, culture is a living, breathing thing. So we have to continue to work on and continue to maintain. But, supporting each other is a big pillar within that. I've never played on a team that's, more excited for each other's success. And that doesn't mean that we're not, pushing each other on the ice and competing. I can guarantee you we are. Sometimes the net front battles in practice are harder than in games, for sure. But that's a big piece. Communication amongst our group is a huge piece of that as well. Making sure that we're communicating with our staff and having difficult conversations, which is, I think, one of the toughest things for organizations to routinely do. It's something that we have to continue to do. I think the other piece for us was, and something that we really focused on in the 2022 Olympic year, was making sure that new members of our team felt safe to make mistakes. So we tried to create a psychologically safe environment, is the way we put it, where people felt that they could kind of bring their whole selves to work, their whole selves to the dressing room, and not feel like a mistake would make or break them. And I think that's super important in a sport where, hockey's a science, but it's also an art. You got to play free. You got to play creative. You got to, be in that flow state that I talked about. And then the other piece was making sure that everyone feels like they have an opportunity to lead, and everyone, brings something important to the table. That's something we wanted to instill in our rookies in that Olympic year, that, it could be your first tournament, international tournament, it could be your seventh, but we wanted everyone's voice to be heard. So those are some of the pillars that we, worked on. And I think if you asked anyone on our team, we did a pretty good job building into our culture. But like I said, it's a living, breathing thing. So we have to make sure that we're kind of fostering it every event we go to. Even right now when we're apart, we just finished the World Championships, but we're apart for a couple of weeks. It's, we still have those moments to check in with each other. It takes constant work, I think, because it's not easy to establish, and it's, like they say about trust, it's easy for it to just disappear. So it's something that we have to continue to work on.
And in your role, in your leadership role in the team, like, what do you think has been important for you to help to foster that psychological safety? And what do you think is some of what you've done to show those new members that it's okay to make mistakes?
Well, one of the things that I think I learned about myself as a leader, and I guess one of the things that I focused on in my own leadership, was making sure that I did the work to get to know teammates, not as hockey players, but as people. Because, naturally, everyone has their own sort of style of leadership, and I don't think naturally I'm the most approachable. I would say I'm not mean or anything. It's just, there's people that when you walk in a room, right, they just make everyone feel at home. Like, that style of leadership, that doesn't come natural to me. So I kind of needed to build a plan to make sure that I was connecting with all those teammates, especially the ones that, I didn't know on a personal level yet. So that was something that I kind of just always had a checklist at different camps and different events throughout the year, like making sure that I connected with people and had conversations with people and just touch points. Because I really think, people, there's a saying for it, is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think that's what it is. And I think that's so true. If you're, you want people to feel safe, they got to know that you care about them as a person, that you genuinely want to see them succeed, and it's not for some game or some ulterior motive. So that was a big focus for me, was just having those conversations, so that, when I did approach a young player and, welcome into a role, or we needed them to do something big, they weren't like, who is this player? I don't know you. Who is, like, what are you trying to do here? So that was a big focal point for me.
Mm-hmm. Curious, do you feel that you approach your life outside of hockey with the same rigor and focus as you do at work?
That's a really great question. I've never been asked that. I like to think that I do, but I think, sometimes the lessons that I've learned in, the professional workspace of being a part of a team like Team Canada, sometimes I forget to use those same tools at home. My wife would probably say that I need more of the patience that I have for my teammates, as I do for her. But I think the education that I've received in terms of teamwork and culture and mental performance, I think it definitely translates. It can only help me in my personal life and personal goals, and definitely translates for the most part. I think I could be better in probably all areas of life as well.
We all could. uh, so yeah, you've been participated in 3 Olympics. Sounds like you were super close to even the first one that you didn't make the team for. But you've won 2 golds and 1 silver at the Olympics, and recently were the tournament's, like, was it 2022 most valuable player? Did you set a record for how many goals or points were scored?
Goals,
I think that was
yeah, somehow.
goals. Nice. Which is incredible.
Brianne, why the somehow?
It's just somehow. Yeah, it's just crazy to me. I guess like a stat like that, it just seems like you've done something like superhuman or great, but really it's just being a solid forward on a team that moved the puck so well. Like, it's so interesting in that tournament, the team set a bunch of records, and this is sort of like the poetry of sport. It was, a team that shared the puck better than any team I've been on, and then broke all these individual records. Like, the sport just teaches us those lessons, and sometimes it's so obvious. It's like, this was the most unselfish team, and of course, that's how you create the most success. So it's just interesting. So it feels weird when you say a stat like that, because it was just sort of just a byproduct of the greatest team.
Wow, that's so inspiring. It really makes you feel like you stand on each other's shoulders.
For sure. I mean, they don't talk about, that was my role. I was playing on a line with, very offensive players. That was our role, was to score goals, but they never talk about the players whose role was to PK, right, or to block shots. So we get that in our locker room. I wish the media got that more, but hey, goals are fun, so that's why we pay attention to it.
No kidding. I was literally just thinking that they single out stats like goals, and
yeah.
I just from the way you're speaking, I could tell that the culture on the team is like incredible. It's really rubbing off. At the beginning of this conversation, you kind of already almost joked about, retirement being somewhere on the horizon, but you also said that, your physical fitness right now is great in your 30s and better than your 20s even. It sounds like the retirement's some ways off, but how do you think about, what's next for you? And is there any such thing as like preparation for the next step, or is it just pure focus on, the next tournament, the next performance, next practice?
Well, I think because of the landscape of women's professional hockey, what comes after our playing career is something that unfortunately we've all had to think about since the outset of our careers. Most women's hockey players go to university to get a degree, and that's, play NCAA or U Sport hockey. Most of my peers have done a master's. I've done a master's. Most of my peers do some work outside just playing. So it's something that I've definitely thought about and considered. But the main focus right now remains on the playing career.
I want to finish. I want to spend the last few minutes about, just a little bit more about your personal life. So how has motherhood been? And was it about a year and a half ago that you became a mother?
Yeah. September of 2021. So a little over a year and a half ago, and it's been it's just the greatest joy in my life. It's given me so much perspective. You think you have perspective, and then you have a kid, and it just changes things. So it's been an amazing journey.
Has it changed at all how you approach your sport, your work life?
Well, I think because of the demands of parenting, you kind of leave your work at work, and you kind of also have that perspective of, okay, it's just hockey. As much as passionate as I am about it, and the fact that we're role models and all those important things, but at the end of the day, it is hockey. And when you get home, when you have a kid to take care of and chase around the house, then it allows you to disconnect, which I think is a really healthy thing too. Is to leave the stresses of hockey and performance, and just allow your brain to focus on something else. I think it's been a benefit to my career, even though I have a lot less sleep. I think I've gained a lot of other positives, and I feel like it's made me a better hockey player.
Yeah, I can relate to the less sleep part. I bet our children are probably around the same age. Actually, mine's about 18 months old. And how have you how are you finding, like, being away at tournaments and having like such high commitments with your team? How does that affect being a mom and being in your with your partner and sharing those responsibilities as as parents?
That was definitely the hardest part about the Beijing Olympic year, because the pandemic had me. We were in bubbled World Championships. We were in quarantine a lot of the time leading up to the Olympics, so that was definitely the hardest part of that whole season for me. Was, I was away from my daughter for, I think it was like 50 something days for the Olympics, and then just even this past World Championship in Denmark in 2022, it was 35 days. So I know that there's parents that are away from their kids longer in different lines of work, but that was definitely the biggest challenge for me. Was a little bit of that guilt of being away. But I was extremely lucky in my wife and how much of a rock she was, but also in the support network we have. We have 4 grandparents that are very involved and very loving and willing to help. And that year wouldn't have been possible without that support network.
I love to hear that. Yeah, that must be very, very difficult being away for that long. Not only missing your child, but yeah, the other emotions associated with not being able to contribute. And how are you hoping to sort of raise your child in this world? Like, Kim and I have had other conversations with other guests around the real conversations that people have these days about having children, and how, like, it's 2023 right now, and culturally there's a lot of issues, and there's existential threats and everything. I don't know, maybe I'm causing too much anxiety here, but like, do you think about a world that you want to be bringing your child into, and how, like, you can influence that? Or are you a little bit more laissez-faire?
I think about it. Do I have the answers? No, I feel like I don't have it figured out. And if you have any insights, Rob, I'm open to them. But I think, yeah, I feel like one of the things I've learned with parenting is, like, it's really kept me in the present. Just you have to be focused so intently on what they're doing and the stage that they're at, and it's like it's hard to look a day down the line, let alone months down the line. So I think, have I focused on those anxiety inducing problems that much? Probably is not as much as I should. But I do definitely, it influences my decisions in, well, all my decisions. I think I have that new layer of thinking, whether it's, how I'm voting, or what I'm supporting in my community, or the way that I'm speaking in the media. I think just all of those things, it's given a new perspective. What would I want June seeing me doing? What is the right example for her? So I think it's definitely influenced a lot of things. I wish I had an answer to climate change. One person could influence that, but now that's something that I think about, and more so now in the next generation. And there's so many issues like that. So I think it just kind of seeps into all of the decisions that I'm making in my interactions with my community.
Yeah. That's amazing. Do you find that because you hold your professional life and like to such level of standards, like such a high level of standards, do you find that creeps into like, do you view being a parent as like a job, or are you just able to stay present at the moment and not put too much pressure on yourself?
Yeah, I don't think I have sort of that level of perfectionism when it comes to being a parent, just because it's impossible, right? Like, we want to be the
Yeah.
best for our kids and provide the best for our kids, but I think all we can do is our best, and be present with them, and make them feel safe and loved. And so I try to focus on those big things. But yeah, there's always that sort of um, it's the same way that self-doubt creeps in when you're an athlete. Like, there's that self-doubt, like, oh, am I doing enough? I pick up my phone and June's playing on the floor. I'm like, oh, should I be on my phone right now? Those things that are always, weighing on you as a parent. So um, I think I have a realistic expectation that, you can't be perfect in anything you do, but try to be as present as possible and provide a good example, because what I've learned too is just kids pick up on everything that you do, every little behavior. You see them mimicking it, and you're like, where did they learn that? And it's like, well, from you.
Yeah, no doubt. I have the same guilt. I think all of our generation has the same guilt around using a device in front of a child, and
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it is always just feel so bad, but then you're just so addictive. I'm curious, maybe just to kind of start to wrap things up, like, how do you spend your downtime? Like, how do you have fun? How do you bring kind of more joy into your life? Besides your daughter, I'm sure. What sort of things do you take time for yourself?
I think just like spending time outside is a big one. It sounds so simple, but like, that feeling when you're inside all day, maybe sitting at a desk, and like you just don't feel like you can relax. So I think, especially now that it's spring and summer's around the corner, we try to get outside, go to the park, just different things like that. So I think that's a big piece, and just trying to have time to have adult conversations with my wife, rather than just always talking about logistics and the kid. I think that's easy for married couples to fall into that. So just time and space for those things. And we're really close with our family, so we FaceTime family a lot, and just stay connected with people as much as we can.
Amazing to hear. Kim, do you have any final questions or comments?
I nothing in particular comes to mind. I've just really enjoyed our conversation, and I was just thinking about how incredibly well adjusted you are, Brianne. Like, you're just such a level-headed, warm, thoughtful person, and I just wanted to thank you for spending this time with us.
Thank you. I feel like you're catching me on a good day, but no one's. I think I've learned a lot from my time in high performance sport, but there's a lot to learn still. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had, is if you think you have it all figured out, then that's when you're in trouble. So I think there's always more to learn, and I think conversations like this, where you're taking little tidbits from the people that you interact with and the people that you meet along the way, that's a big piece of how you can learn. So just chatting with you, I feel like I have some new takeaways for sure.
Thank you so much, Brianne. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure, and definitely be following your career, and I hope to keep in touch in the future. So thanks for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Actualize podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode, as well as all other episodes, at firstsession.com/podcast. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.